Hi there. Thanks for tuning in to video 2 of 3 on how to use the Wildcloud platform. In video 2, we get a little more technical and explain how the infrastructure works in order to talk about pricing. We cover how our containerized cloud platform enables a serverless, auto-scalable hosting experience. And we discuss how to optimize your costs with little to no overhead. I have a few slides prepared to help explain the platform, and then we'll jump into the console itself to show you how to control your application configuration. In video 1, we covered how an application is defined as a collection of individual WordPress sites that are managed via a shared codebase. These WordPress sites are referred to as tenants, and the standardized codebase is controlled via a version. This shared codebase is called multi-tenant WordPress and enables the same scalable workflow as SaaS companies like Dropbox, Shopify, and Slack. In video 1, we demonstrated how this results in faster website development, stress-free management, and safe updates. Multi-tenancy is a software architecture where a single instance of a software application serves multiple customers or tenants. Each tenant in a multi-tenant system is a separate and independent entity, often representing different organizations, users, or customers. In the WordPress context, multi-tenancy is a technique that lets you run multiple WordPress websites on one shared environment. And we say environment because Wildcloud's multi-tenant cloud hosting, it is not just a site, it's an innovative way to host many sites in a cloud-native way, bringing WordPress hosting technology to the 21st century. Because of the cloud-native approach the Wildcloud platform has been built, there are certain functionalities that are harder to implement through more traditional hosting. Unlike any other hosting company, Wildcloud has version control and enables far-reaching automation. And as we'll see in this video, cloud scaling. The cloud-native approach of the Wildcloud platform steps away from the traditional hosting methods of WordPress, because instead of using servers, our infrastructure is serverless. And this allows for a modern scaling approach. Instead of needing to increase the RAM or CPU of the servers that are serving the websites, also called vertical scaling, the Wildcloud platform relies on horizontal scaling. That is, instead of using a heavier server, the platform will simply use more servers. And this allows for up and down scaling according to the needs of all the resources on the platform. The benefit here is that there's no need to be actually involved in this. It all happens automatically according to the needs of your application. The tenants running on the platform are not aware of this, and the infrastructural layer of the platform handles this resource management autonomously. This serverless infrastructure that allows for more or fewer servers, so to speak, to scale your websites is built using something called containerization. Wildcloud uses Docker and Kubernetes to orchestrate these containers, and we won't dive into a technical explanation of what those tools do, but we're going to dive into containers in order to understand our pricing. Every tenant or website on Wildcloud runs on a container. A container is a lightweight, standalone package that includes everything needed to run a piece of software, including the code, the runtime, libraries, and system tools. These containers act like what on a traditional hosting solution would be a virtual machine or VM for short, but they are completely different. The main difference is that creating a new VM and configuring this to run a site can be quite a hustle. Setting up a new server is even more work. Containers, however, can be easily run everywhere due to the pre-packaged nature and portability to almost every system. Where VMs or servers are bulky and static, containers are lightweight and can be handled much more dynamic. The qualities of a server in terms of CPU and RAM are usually set in stone, at least as long as you're not able to add more RAM in a physical machine. And VMs are a bit more easy to change, but they are usually bulky, not optimized, and thus require a lengthy restart to change. Containers, because of their specialization and focus on minimizing overhead, are easily created and destroyed. The container configuration determines the CPU and memory that is available to containers serving the tenants of an application. It therefore determines the quality of the containers that serve the tenants within the application. Because containers are dynamic, if these values need to be changed, we simply create a new container with the updated properties, we schedule it to our cluster and remove the old containers. The cluster itself makes sure all the traffic is routed correctly, and a rolling update together with health and availability checks will ensure that there is zero downtime for serving the tenants. To determine the correct configuration, it is good to start at what the tenants that are being served by these containers need. When the tenants being served are mostly portfolio sites or consist of simple pages with little to no complexity, then using a small container usually works fine. When the sites become more complex, like e-commerce, or when the sites run on themes and editors that require more memory when your user or customer is editing their site, it is good to take at least a general purpose container. And certain applications, such as larger e-commerce applications, learning management systems, or sites that combine various tools, will need more memory and CPU to properly function. And for those applications, we advise a heavy-duty container to ensure availability. Let's take a closer look at how it works. You can choose a small, general purpose, and heavy-duty container, each offering specific CPU and memory configurations. You can switch between these container types at any time to best fit your application requirements. You have the freedom to define your application's resource usage by setting a minimum and maximum number of containers. This scalability ensures that your resources align with your current needs. Charges are based on your actual consumption, calculated by the total number of container hours utilized across your subscription for the month. With our usage-based pricing, you can estimate your monthly costs by considering the minimum and maximum usage thresholds for your containers. The minimum sets your baseline costs, while the maximum caps your potential expenditure. However, in practice, your bill never reflects the minimum or maximum setting, but rather something in between. There are two approaches to scaling your resources: absolute scaling and per tenant scaling. These configurations determine how the number of containers, each serving one or multiple tenants, is managed in response to fluctuating traffic and workload demands. The choice between two methods hinges on the nature of your WaaS platform, the predictability of your traffic, and the growth trajectory of your tenant base. All scaling involves setting a fixed minimum number of containers. Our platform minimum is 2. For absolute, the maximum number of containers will be available to serve all tenants on the platform. And this method is straightforward and is often chosen when the collective resource needs of the tenants are predictable and relatively stable. It's ideal for WaaS platforms with a consistent performance requirement, where traffic peaks and valleys are well known and can be planned for in advance. Per tenant scaling, on the other hand, ties the number of containers to the number of active tenants. This dynamic approach automatically adjusts the number of containers based on the total number of tenants, providing a ratio that defines how many containers are allocated per tenant. And this configuration is particularly effective for WaaS platforms that experience organic growth or have tenants with varying levels of resource consumption. Both configurations offer the flexibility inherent to usage-based pricing, ensuring that you only pay for the resources you use. Next to usage-based pricing for containers, resource-based pricing is applied to various components critical to the operation of your applications. Here's how each component factors into the resource-based pricing model, designed to make sure you have the least amount of overhead we can possibly apply for a cloud platform. For backups, the first 5 GB per tenant is free, with subsequent storage billed per gigabyte. You can choose from various backup frequencies, from monthly to hourly, each with a different cost implication. Cron jobs are automated tasks essential for maintenance and operational functions, such as sending confirmation emails, and are priced on their frequency. Daily cron jobs are free, with more frequent tasks up to every minute incurring additional charges. When actively developing, you might use different versions for your application. There's a base cost for maintaining a version of $2 per month, and additional charges apply based on the number of hours the version is running. Snapshots capture historical states of your application and can be used to create templated sites. The first 5 GB are free, with extra storage available at an additional cost. You can see our current prices per container, backups, and cron jobs on the pricing page at wildcloud.com. Usage-based pricing is our way to accommodate the unique demands of your applications, and it ensures that you have full control over your resource allocation and billing, providing a cost-effective solution. Now that we've covered the technical stuff, let's cover an example. Please keep in mind that we have multiple examples of different use cases in our documentation, and I'll link those in the description below. If you'd like us to create an example of your use case, get in touch or email us with your use case. Of course, specific container configuration and cost optimization consultancy is covered as part of our white glove onboarding service that's available for everyone. All right, let's discuss the most common use case on the Wild Cloud platform. A website as a service offering simple portfolio websites with little functionality for companies like lawyers, doctors, and gyms. These are the example specifics of such a product. They have about 5 to 15 pages, they have a blog, a gallery, and a form. And that's pretty much it. As mentioned earlier, for a site like this, we can easily get by on a small container. Here's what we get with a small container. We get 1 vCPU per container, 512 megabytes. It will cost us about $12 per month. And if you divide that by the hours of the month, that's a little more than 1 cent per hour. Professional services websites, such as those for local lawyers and doctors, typically have lower traffic because they serve a smaller, localized client base. Therefore, they don't need as much server power. Here's a suggested scaling configuration for these low traffic sites. In the example, we assume we start with 10 sites and we're growing quick. This is why we choose per tenant scaling, to make sure we cap our resources while automating our scalability at the same time. The minimum scale we put is 2 containers. As mentioned, this is the minimum for all accounts. The maximum scale is going to be 0.5 container per tenant, and this caps the resource usage at 50% of a full container. To arrive at an estimate of your monthly bill, we need to calculate peak utilization. Peak utilization refers to the times when your websites are getting the most traffic. For a WAS like this, we estimate it to be 15% of the month. With a month averaging 730 hours, 15% peak hours would be about 109.5 hours, or let's say 4.5 days. This estimate helps us calculate the cost of running your container during the busiest times. And for backups, you can set a weekly schedule, which strikes a balance between safety and cost. And for those essential tasks that need to run regularly, like appointment bookings, you can set the cron jobs at 50 minutes. Now let's break down the cost for one tenant. We'll look at a standard traffic scenario and an increased traffic scenario for busier months. Now, let's break down the cost for one tenant. We'll look at a standard traffic scenario and an increased traffic scenario for busier months. In a standard month with typical low traffic, the cost per tenant, assuming 10 tenants, are as follows. First, we have a base cost per tenant, which is $2. These are the fixed costs for the basic services provided by WildCloud. Then, we have the container minimum, which, in our case, is $2.4 per website. Then, we have the container maximum. In this case, it's $6. Like I mentioned before, it's not going to be $6, it's going to be somewhere in between, which is why we need our peak costs. Now, the peak cost is basically the maximum number of containers that we've set as the maximum, and then divided by our estimate of the peak traffic. So in this case, it's $6 times 0.15, 0.15, which results in $0.9. Then we mentioned we have weekly backups, which result in 38 cents per tenant per month, and then the cron jobs, and these are 50 cents if you want to run them every 15 minutes. So now we add up the base costs of $2 with the container minimum, which is $2.4, makes $4.4. Then we add the peak costs, which is 0.9, the backups, the cron jobs, resulting for a standard month, a tenant price of $6.18. Now keep in mind that we have set up an auto-scalable environment. So we don't have to worry about server scalability. We don't have to worry about anything related to peak traffic. And so then when a busier month comes around, such as, for example, with seasonal marketing activities in, let's say, November, when you want to run a Black Friday deal, for example, then your peak hours can rise from 15% to 45% of the month. And in this case, we still maintain a base cost of $2. The minimum stays at 2.4, but now the maximum is $6 times 0.45. And this results in $2.7 peak traffic for that month. Now, the backups remain the same, the cron jobs remain the same. So if we add up $2 base cost with the minimum of $2.4, and then the peak costs of $2.7 with the backups and the cron jobs, this results in a busy month tenant fee of $7.98. And for professional services, this is great. This is an amazing price. We can scale up and down. In essence, we will have a very low monthly fee. And if you want to get in touch to have a consultation or hands-on service to help optimize your container configuration to make sure that these prices work for you as well, and make sure you never overpay for the resources you actually need, please get in touch or move on to video number 3, in which we'll cover how to automate your business with a storefront and use the API to basically create a self-service experience for your customers. I'll see you there.